unfortunately, when institutions like Newsweek say we're all socialists now, they mean one of two things. They mean what used to be like Russian-style communism, which is now like North Korean and Cuban-style communism. And it's somewhat of an anachronistic comparison because, for example, for people born who are born in the 90s, Russia has always been a capitalist country. How many people here were born in the 90s? Okay. Another big chunk of the audience. It's funny because in the 80s when I was growing up, there were movies like Red Dawn, which were like, the scary Russians are going to come invade you. I've been told, like, when I'm out on the street talking to people about socialism, like, hey, go back to Russia. And my response is always like, well, I've never been there. Like, I grew up 20 miles from here. And then I tell them, I'm like, you're pointing in the wrong direction. Like, Russia is not south of here. So you've got that wrong as well. And at one time in Russia, the working class of that society did hold power. It was defeated by a counter-revolution led by Joseph Stalin. And all vestiges of workers' control were replaced by a form of capitalism where the state owns everything. But this is a state that's a one-party police state without even the semblance of democracy. And these distortions have been continued on the left and the right. On the left in this country, because the Communist Party and here and internationally looked to Russia as an example, was allied with Russia, were instruments of Russia's foreign policy. And on the right, there's the distortions from the capitalist politicians here, because what they want to tell us is like, oh, you don't want to fight for anything better. You don't want to try to replace capitalism with anything. Well, she'll get his tyranny. Look at Russia. Look at the gulags. Look at the slave labor camps. Look at the famines caused by the government. Look how terrible it is there. And that amounts to a really conservative position where anytime you fight for a better world, you get tyranny, which is what our rulers have been telling us for 4,000 years. Incidentally. And the last thing I say to the people who are like, go back to Russia is like, well, I don't want to go there because if I'm a revolutionary socialist, and if I could also take a time machine back to when you're talking about, as well as go to Russia physically, I would be locked up for opposing the regime like oppositionists were to the opposition to Stalin was in the 20s and 30s. And this is also what the teabaggers were referencing in their protest on September 12th. Has anyone been paying attention to that? Like the self-styled teabaggers, the Glenn Beck people. They had a huge protest in D.C. a couple weeks ago, and this protest was entirely whipped up by corporate money and Fox News bigot Glenn Beck. And the claim that they're giving us is Obama is trying to impose these gulags, these slave labor camps, and they also know that communism is somehow a worse version of socialism, and they've been led to believe that socialism is pretty bad in its own right. And I saw some signs from this protest that said Obama is a Nazi, which these people have been told is also Nazism is worse than communism, so that means he's pretty darn bad. But these are ordinary people terrified by what's happening to the economy and what that means for their health care. And these are people who are being cynically manipulated and used by the far right in this country. And to say that they're being manipulated is not to ridicule ordinary people who are anxious about their own security and are being used by the far right, but it's to just point out that our side needs to put forth a coherent program that's an alternative to capitalism to draw people around. And so that's one thing that people mean when they talk about socialism. The other is what I call social democracy, and I'll explain that a little bit. So every once in a while, when I'm at my job and I'm reading, which fortunately I get to do at my job, most people have miserable jobs where they non-stop have to perform really menial tasks. I get someone who asks me what I'm reading, and it's usually something like the Communist Manifesto. And they're like, oh, I'm from Sweden. We're a socialist country there. I'm like, oh, really? Like, I didn't know about that. That's pretty awesome. So I'm like, oh, so workers are running things over there, right? We have collective democratic control of the economy. And people are like, well, not so much. Like, we still have bosses. The capitalists are still there. But they tell me what those countries have and what we don't is a government-run, single-payer healthcare, which every Western industrialized country besides ours have. They also have pretty good unemployment insurance, good free public higher education, and lots of stuff like that. And those are all great things, but in none of these countries like Sweden, or any of the other northern European countries, have workers gotten rid of bosses, and have we gotten rid of what's the basic feature of capitalist society? That is mainly, there's a small group of parasites at the top, and the rest of us who work to make them rich. We still have that in every society, every country in the world. And we want to get all those things here, a good social safety net, so if you lose the shitty job that you have, you're not out on the street. So if you lose a terrible job that you've had to get, because it's the only way you can get health care in the society, you don't have to worry about losing your health care, and that there's some basic needs of ours that are met. But our struggle isn't gonna end there, because we have a lot more that we want. And what those two things have in common, what like the northern European countries that I've just referred to as social democracy, and Russia and now Cuba and North Korea, what they have in common is more state-run, a more state-run sector of the economy, greater state control over how things are run there, greater state ownership, and just a greater degree of nationalization. Now, a couple of things about that. The United States just nationalized a whole bunch of banks with this massive bailout. All of us in here are each and everyone in this country is on the hook for $45,000 of the national debt. So we've just nationalized that. I don't think any of us are any closer to human liberation because we nationalized a big sector of the American economy than we were before. I actually think we're a lot worse off. So nationalization, no matter how much the right screams about it, does not get us any closer to socialism. So when I said about getting some things here, those are going to be reforms that we're going to have massive struggle to win. Having a conception of socialism that's based on the activity of the mass of people, as Karl Marx referred to it, a movement of the vast majority and the interests of the vast majority, that has implications for how we view struggles for reforms. And I want to talk a little bit about the National Equality March, which is pretty much the most exciting thing going right now. How many people have heard about it? Almost all the room. It means that we're doing a great job getting the word out there. How many people have yet to get their ticket for the buses to go down to DC? A few hands went up. Make sure you talk to us after, because we want to bring everyone who's in this room down to DC to protest for civil rights. We don't want to leave anyone behind for this really exciting civil rights movement. And so for adherents of socialism from below, the conception of socialism that Debs held, that we held today, collective struggle by ordinary people directed against the system is really the most exciting thing happening. It's like Halloween, your birthday, your favorite team winning the Super Bowl, all wrapped up together, only better. Like it's that good. And if you don't believe me, I actually capitalized "it's that good." You can't read off my talk, but I'm that excited about it. So when we talk about collective struggle directed against the system, first thing, let's talk about collective. Our power as workers in capitalist society is based on our collective ability to struggle against exploitation and oppression, which is what we're going to see down in DC, 2 weeks from now? We saw a great example of this with a factory occupation. Yes, a factory occupation in Chicago by workers at Republic Windows and Doors